Let's start our journey 2,400 years ago with one of the most powerful stories ever told about the nature of reality. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato asked us to imagine something extraordinary. Picture a deep, dark cave. Inside, prisoners have been chained since birth, unable to turn their heads. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, people carry objects that cast shadows on the cave wall. These prisoners have never seen the real world. To them, those dancing shadows are reality. A shadow of a book? That's what they call a book. A shadow of a tree? That's their entire concept of what a tree is. But then, one prisoner breaks free. He's dragged outside into the sunlight for the first time. Initially, he's blinded. The real world is too bright, too overwhelming. But slowly, his eyes adjust, and he sees something incredible. The actual objects that were casting those shadows. Trees aren't flat, grey shapes. They're three-dimensional, green, alive. The sun isn't a flickering light on a wall. It's a blazing star that illuminates everything. Reality is vast, complex, and beautiful beyond anything he could have imagined. But here's the twist. When he returns to free the others, they don't believe him. They think he's gone crazy. The shadows feel more real to them than his wild stories about this supposed outside world. So Plato's question becomes ours. Are we the prisoners in the cave? Are we mistaking shadows for reality? And if so, what's the real world actually like? Fast forward to today, and we have a modern version of Plato's cave that might sound familiar. Philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed what's called the simulation hypothesis. Here's the mind-bending logic. If any civilization becomes technologically advanced enough, they could create incredibly realistic simulated worlds. Basically, universe-sized video games populated with conscious beings who don't know they're simulated. Now here's where it gets wild. If this is possible, advanced civilizations would probably create not just one simulation, but millions or billions of them, which means there would be billions of simulated beings for every one real person. Statistically speaking, if you're a conscious being, you're far more likely to be one of the billions of simulated minds than one of the few real ones. In other words, the odds that you are living in a simulation right now are actually pretty high. Think about it. Every morning you wake up, every memory you have, every sensation of touch, taste, or smell could be perfectly programmed experiences. Your entire life story might be generated by some cosmic computer. Here's the thing. Even if we are in a simulation, how would we ever know? If the simulation is perfect, it would feel exactly like reality. The pain would hurt, the joy would feel genuine, the relationships would matter just as much. Which raises the question, if a simulated life is indistinguishable from a real one, does the difference actually matter? But what if we're thinking too small? What if the problem isn't that reality is simulated, but that you are the only thing that's real at all? This is the philosophical position called solipsism. The idea that only your own mind is certain to exist. Everyone else, everything else, might just be projections of your consciousness. Think about it. Everything you've ever experienced has happened inside your mind. You've never actually touched an object. You've experienced your brain's interpretation of nerve signals. You've never heard a sound directly. You've experienced your brain processing vibrations. Every color, every taste, every smell exists only as neural activity in your head. So, how do you know there's anything outside your mind at all? You don't. You can't. René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, realized this when he said, "I think, therefore I am." The only thing he could be absolutely certain of was that he was thinking. If solipsism is true, then this entire video, my voice, every person you've ever loved, every conversation you've had, all of it exists only in your mind. You are utterly, completely alone in the universe, creating all of reality through your consciousness. It's a terrifying thought, and also kind of amazing. If true, you're not just experiencing reality, you are reality. Every sunset you've watched, you created. Every laugh you've shared, you authored. You're not just conscious, you're consciousness itself, dreaming the entire universe into existence. Of course, most philosophers reject solipsism, but they can't prove it wrong, and neither can you. Even if we're not in a simulation, and other minds do exist, there's still a fundamental problem. Our senses lie to us, all the time. Put a straight stick in water, it looks bent. Drive through the desert, you see water that isn't there. Look at the moon, it seems huge near the horizon, tiny overhead, but it's exactly the same size. Your eyes, ears, and brain are constantly being fooled. Magicians have built entire careers on the fact that our perception is unreliable. We see what we expect to see, not necessarily what's actually there. Our brains fill in gaps, make assumptions, and sometimes just make stuff up. Here's the thing. Everything you call reality is actually your brain's best guess about what's out there. Light hits your retina, gets converted to electrical signals, and your brain constructs an image. Sound waves hit your eardrums, get translated to neural patterns, and your brain creates the experience of hearing. So if our senses can be fooled by simple tricks, how do we know they're not being fooled constantly? What if the colors you see aren't the colors that are actually there? What if the sounds you hear are just hallucinations your brain creates? This is called the argument from illusion, and it suggests that we never actually perceive the external world directly. We only ever experience our mind's interpretation of sensory data. The real world, if it exists, might be completely different from what we think it is. We're like someone trying to understand the outside world by looking through a funhouse mirror. The mirror shows us something, but how much does it really tell us about what's actually out there? So, here we are, fellow cosmic travelers, confronted with some deeply unsettling possibilities. Maybe we're prisoners in Plato's cave, mistaking shadows for reality. Maybe we're characters in an unimaginably advanced simulation. Maybe you're the only conscious being in existence, dreaming everyone else into being. Or maybe our senses are so unreliable that we can never know what's actually real. But here's what I find beautiful about these questions. They don't necessarily lead to despair. They lead to wonder. If reality is malleable, mysterious, possibly even under our control, then existence becomes an adventure of discovery rather than a prison of predetermined facts. Whether you're in a cave, a simulation, or a universe of your own making, you're still experiencing something incredible. Consciousness, your consciousness, is still happening. And that might be the most amazing fact of all. Maybe the question isn't whether reality is real in some absolute sense. Maybe the question is, what will you do with this consciousness you definitely have? In this experience, you're undeniably living. Keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, in a universe this mysterious, anything is possible.